From the May 5th, 1934 edition of The New Yorker, How to Relax While Broadcasting by James Thurber. The evening I went up to the studios for my first radio broadcast, I got off by mistake at the 16th floor instead of the 17th. I decided not to wait for the elevator, but just run up the stairs to the 17th floor because elevators in broadcasting buildings are always crowded with small Italian musicians carrying cellos. And furthermore, when the up sign above the elevators in these buildings lights, the operator of the car that stops where you usually says, "Down!" And before you can think, you find yourself on the first floor again without any way of getting back up because you surrendered your pass to the man at the desk in the lobby the first time you went up. I walked to a door on the 16th floor marked stairs and stepped out into a cold, dark staircase shaft and walked up one flight. I found that the door on that floor wouldn't open. It was after 7 o'clock in the evening and the door had been officially locked. I hurried back down to the 16th floor and discovered that the door there had locked behind me too. I began to beat on it and kick it. From far off, a faint voice came to me finally saying, "Cut that out!" The only thing to do was walk down 15 flights to the main floor, which I did, but the door out into the lobby was also locked, and nobody answered my screams and poundings. Screaming and pounding is not radio, as the broadcasting people say. I went down into the basement, which was dark and gloomy, and hunted for the elevator shaft. I found it, but there was no bell to push, so I sat on an old chair until the car came down. The operator was surprised to see me and asked me for my pass. I told him I didn't have a pass. He thought a while and then asked if Mr. Heyman knew I was down there. I said I didn't think so. He was pretty much alarmed by that, but he took me up to the 17th floor after warning me never to come down to the basement again without a pass. There was nobody on the 17th floor who understood my case, although the people I talked to were patient and courteous. They said the 17th floor was entirely given over to the business department and had no studios or microphones. What I probably wanted was the 27th floor. Up there, I found some people I had met before, but they were pretty busy and seemed to think it was the wrong night. I sat down in a chair, and presently a man came up to me and asked me if I was Mr. Thurber. I said I wasn't sure, and he said to follow him. I was shown into an office where there were some officials I knew and some friends of mine. One of the officials was denying a story somebody had been telling about a man who fell dead in front of the microphone. It seems he had merely had a stroke. In a little while, I was led in a solemn march to a small and lonely studio, heavily draped and silent. I took out a cigarette but saw a sign saying no smoking, so I put the cigarette away again. Some men in the glassed-in control room began to look at me. I could see their lips move, but I couldn't hear anything. A man tiptoed into the room where I was and shook hands with me and tiptoed out again. He never came back. I walked over to a regular microphone, such as I had talked over once or twice before and had got used to, but somebody led me away from that, said I was to talk over a table microphone because it would help me to relax. This turned out to be a table about the size of a card table with a microphone set innocently in its center, face up, more or less like an ashtray. Its studied simplicity caused me to tighten up slightly, and I mentioned this to a man. "Be at your ease," he said. I stood over the table, grasped its edges firmly, and leaned down toward the microphone. Someone grasped me. No, he said. You just sit down at the table as if you were sitting in a chair at any table and talk. I sat down, trying to remember how I sit in a chair at a table, especially a card table at which nobody else is sitting. "Relax," said someone with a note of command. I slumped back in the chair and placed on the table the papers I was going to use and began fussing with them. "Shh," somebody hissed. "Don't rustle them." This is a very highly sensitized mic, which picks up every slightest sound. It would sound like a waterfall if you rustled them. I began to drum my fingers on the tabletop, but a courteous official put his hand on mine and stopped that. Tapping would sound like cavalry crossing a bridge to your listeners, he explained. Just take it easy. I leaned back in my chair and adjusted my tie, doubtless giving the effect of someone trying to take a leather belt away from a bulldog. In a moment, an announcer came in and said we were all ready to go. "Okay," I said, standing up, "let's get out." He smiled with calm assurance and said no, he meant that we were about to start the program. Everybody but him tiptoed out of the room. I sat down at the table again. I could see them all watching me from the control room. Somebody in there raised his hand sharply and let it drop sharply. I expected to hear the faint hiss of lethal gas escaping into the chamber, but instead the announcer started to talk. I creaked nervously in the chair at this, and the listeners heard, along with his calm announcement, the sound of a buckboard falling over a cliff. Finally, he pointed a finger at me. I sat bolt up and began to talk to the ashtray. When it was all over, everybody tiptoed whisperingly into the room and congratulated me on being only 5 seconds too slow. Not bad for a beginner. The record is 1/500th of a second. I got up and started out of the room, but a man followed me and took me by the arm. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Let's all go out and get a drink," I said. "But you haven't got time," he said. "All this has just been the rehearsal." I must have tightened up horribly at that, for he said soothingly, "Take it easy. You got plenty of time to relax in." He looked at his wristwatch. "You got 4 minutes. How to Relax While Broadcasting by James Thurber.